the mighty die. Warmachine more, that'll get more. Cygnar versus Cryx.
Hi there, Steve here with another bat rep for you. This time it's Cryx versus Cygnar. I played Maddox again, and I was playing up against Chris. He's our Cryx player, and he was playing Goreshade 1, Goreshade the Bastard, today. So I'll get the lists up for you. So the Goreshade list is Goreshade the Bastard. He's got a Deathwalker with him as he's a unit. He's got 2 Slayers and 2 Reapers. One of the Reapers being represented by the Nightmare model today. The fully painted one, looks very nice. Then he's also got 3 Machine Wraiths, 2 Warwitch Sirens, and a full unit of Bane Knights and a full unit of Bane Warriors, accompanied by Tartarus. And I took the same list I've been taking for a few games now, so it's Maddox with 2 Stormclads, Journeyman Warcaster with a Firefly, 2 minimum units of Stormlancers and Lattimore, and a minimum unit of Trenchers with 2 weapon attachments, the CA and Finn. So it's 2 very high damage output lists, but are also sort of reasonably squishy lists. And the game really depended very much on who was going to get the charges off as to who was going to win. So I didn't, looking at the scenario, I didn't really think about winning on scenario, because I thought that camping on a zone would probably result in getting charged and dying. But Christian won the roll-off and decided to go first. So I naturally chose the table edge that was much more open for me. Otherwise, with all my large bases, I'd get some real problems. If I took the side with the forest, I'd be squeezing through a tiny gap with a lot of my guys. The cavalry might have been quick enough to go around the outside of the terrain, but in the end, yeah, I decided to take the one with the hill and the nice open terrain, and I think that was the right decision. And then, because Christian had so many models with Ghostly, he was able to pretty much ignore a lot of that terrain. So it wasn't too important for him to worry about which side he was on, especially on this map. So nevertheless, he skewed quite heavily over to his own zone in his deployment. I believe because of the forest, he really needed to use that forest to park his Banes in before his second turn. And yeah, so my zone is actually pretty closed off to him. It's quite a long way away, and also pretty sort of blocked in by that huge column of rocks. So maybe I should have been more aware of that during the game. So we'll see how that goes. I was pretty confident again, as I usually am, possibly mistakenly, but I thought that, again, yeah, it'd be very important for me to get better threat ranges, and also to make sure that I was the one that got the charges, and I felt like I could do that. So I set up directly opposite him. He skewed over to the left, so I skewed over to the left as well. I put Maddox quite close to the centre, but I wanted her to be able to go up on the hill on her first turn for the extra defence bonus in case Christian decided to use some spells, although he doesn't have a lot of shooting, in fact almost no shooting in his list. And then all of the cavalry is far over on the left, ready to storm his zone. Maddox has got her bodyguard of Stormclads on either side of her, ready to block line of sight to her. And then the trenches, because they've got some nice shooting with snipe if I want it, I thought that it would be handy to use Finn to park in my zone, just in case he decides to do a refuse flank and run over to my side of the table. Yeah, but pretty much because of the placement of the terrain, pretty much the whole battle happened on the left-hand side of the battlefield. So, Christian's first turn, so he ran up, obviously. He got his Reapers up the front. They're slightly faster than his Banes, so they're slightly further forward. And the Slayers are hiding behind, so I think at this point he decided to sacrifice the Reapers to my charge to get my Stormclads out front. And then, as we thought, the Banes are through the forest on the right and going through the rocks on the left, ready to Well, I think what Christian likes to do is he likes to tempt you to kill one of his Bane Knights, and then they use Vengeance to have a much longer charge range than you thought. So a lot of the time you can shoot one of them, or two of them, but then that then allows the rest of them to be able to charge you on the next turn, so it's a pretty nasty tactic. And all of the machine wraiths are all out front. Now the machine wraiths are a big problem for my list. So my list, I worry about control feats. So any casters that have a nice control feat that stop you from getting a good charge pretty much hurts my list a lot. And one of the other things that I have a problem with is incorporeal. So those machine wraiths with incorporeal, if they get to my stormclads, then they can just turn around and hit Maddox, and that's going to be a bit of a big problem. So that forced me to play Maddox quite differently than I should have been in this list, and I think it was pretty key. Just the threat of the machine wraiths was enough to get me to make some mistakes in this game. So it was quite tactical having those machine wraiths in there. So yeah, so he ran up, Bane's left and right, Jack's in the middle, and machine wraiths at the front. And so I ran up as well. I made very sure that I was outside of his charge range for everything. I got my trenches in front of my stormclads to try and prevent him from running up and standing next to my stormclads with his machine wraiths. And I think Finn ran into the zone and on my right, and then shot one Bane, and then repositioned back outside of charge range. And so I got the first kill of the game, but that's all I did in that round. So it was really just running up and trying to stay outside of his charge ranges. So that kind of forced, on his second turn, it forced him to run a lot of his guys up, and he's spending a lot of time trying to mitigate damage. So in the middle of the board there's those swamps which were playing as water, and so he was able to park his Banes behind that and not worry too much about getting charged by the trenches. But on the left he had to put up 3 or 4 Bane Knights to try and sacrifice them in order to allow the rest of them to charge my cavalry on the following turn. Pretty good technique as it turned out. And then he's got both Reapers up at the front, and the Slayers are hanging back behind them, because the Reapers can do a couple of shots and the Slayers can then countercharge whatever charges the Reapers. And the Reapers, one of them shot my Firefly and dragged him, and that allowed the Bane Knights to charge up and take down the Firefly. So I'm minus the Firefly at this point. Not too worried about it. I mean, I don't think he should have been a priority target, really, because he doesn't make that much difference. Pretty much whoever charges is going to be killing whatever gets charged in this game. There's not a lot of arms skew or defense skew, so it's going to be a very killy game, I think. So yeah, basically he ran everything up and braced himself for my charge. So that's what I did. My Stormclads were able to charge up and took down both of the Reapers, no problem at all. The Trenchers really concentrated on killing Tartarus, because he's really nasty. He would be turning my Trenchers into Banes, and that would be very dangerous for me. So yeah, I did some charges and then used the assault shots on the charges to take down Tartarus. Afterwards I regretted not casting the Pathfinder spell from Maddox to allow them to actually get in there and make the battle line on the other side of the swamp. That would have given Maddox a little bit more space to work later in the game. Then Maddox charged one of the machine wraiths and took it down, but unfortunately left the other one alive. Because of the charge angle, I wasn't able to get line of sight on the second one for another attack. So I was forced to get Maddox out there to try and take down the machine wraiths because she had a magical weapon, but unfortunately one was left alive. That gave me some real problems later in the game. Then my Stormlancers did some charging, did some impact attacks, and took down a lot of the Bane Knights on the left. Unfortunately, a couple of them failed to take down one of the Bane Knights out the front, and so ended up hanging quite a long way back on the left there. You can see them down at the bottom of the screen. And the Journeyman Warcaster did some work in this game. She managed to take out a couple of Bane Knights over the course of the game as well. She's there on the hill, so she avoided getting pinned down by Bane Knights. Lattimore at this point charged past Bane Knight, forgetting about reach, and got her horse taken out from under her in the middle of the charge. So she killed the thing that she was charging, but then ended up horseless and therefore unable to support the Storm Lancers for the rest of the game. So that was a bit of a mistake on my part. So yeah, he's 2 heavies down, which I thought was quite nice, but the Storm Clads are ready to get charged by the Slayers. I've got some trenches out in front of them to try and block it in a little bit. Yeah, so at this point I felt like I was in an okay position, but Maddox is way further forward than I wanted her to be, which, because of the machine wraiths, and I think that was the big mistake of the game, is not dealing with the machine wraiths in a different way. So the next turn, and as you can see, the Bane Knights and Slayer really managed... Oh, I forgot, on my turn I took out his objective and scored a point. Anyway, going back, so his third turn, and yeah, my cavalry is pretty much non-existent at this point. Lattimore did well and survived a bit longer, but apart from that, he took out 5 of my cavalry, which was very good on his part, especially with Arcane Shield up on them, and Maddox's armour spell up on the other ones. Then he also popped feet and managed to get Banes surrounding one of my Stormclads, and the other Stormclad got machine wraithed and turned round and took an attack on Maddox, and I think took down almost... maybe missed, I can't remember, but the other Slayer, by the time the Slayer had trampled some of my trenches and then got to Maddox as well. As you can see, I've got 2 heavies next to me, one of them was mine, and Maddox was down to 1 box, I think, or 3 boxes, or something tiny amount of boxes like that. So I was in a bit of trouble at this point. I've got the Banes bearing down on my trenches. I think they were able to take out 3 or 4 trenches, but they were pretty frustrating to hit, I think, because Banes with Mat 6 against trenches with Defense 13, you actually have to work hard to hit them, so I think he would have preferred that would have been a bit easier. So they're blocking the Bane's path to Maddox, so I've got a chance, but my options are running out pretty rapidly at this point. My left flank's collapsed almost completely. The Stormclad that's surrounded by Banes, he got knocked down to, I think he's got like 9 boxes left. His movement is still intact, but his right arm is out, so that's a bit of a problem as well. So yeah, generally a pretty effective turn 3 for Christian, and he's looking... I think he was looking to close out the game in this turn, but yeah, I had 1 more turn to try and bring it back. So let's have a look at what I did. So yeah, I did a lot of work on this turn, and it was great fun. So Finn on the right, as you can see, he's moved rather a long way. He's now in base-to-base contact with Goreshade. So after my trench, after Finn had activated, he Pac-Manned, which is the new verb that we're using for Finn. He Pac-Manned his way through an entire unit of Banes. So he was just able to chomp his way through because he's Mat 8. And a Weapon Master, so he was needing 4s to hit and 6s on 3 dice to kill. So he just munched his way through the entire unit of Banes. It was amazing fun to do. Christian hated it, obviously, and then because he has reposition 3, so after his last kill he can move another 1 inch and then reposition 3 inches. So he's effectively got reposition 4, and so he was able to get right at the end, get all the way into base contact with Goreshade. So I don't believe Goreshade would have any problems killing him on the next turn, but it's still a problem that he has to deal with. And Finn more than paid for himself by munching through those Banes. So Finn is really one of those models that either does very little or really sways the game for you. So I think if that had been a turn earlier in the game, then I would have had him probably, because that's so much damage that it's very difficult to recover from just vaporising a unit like that. The trenches were able to swing round and kill some of the Banes that were surrounding the Stormclad. The Stormclad still had his movement left, and although his Cortex was out, he was able to do a trample because I had a sail. the upkeep spell Assail up on him, which allows him to do tramples for free. So he was able to trample and took out 3 more Banes, and unfortunately walked over the top of the what's the attachment for Goreshade, I can't remember, the corpse attachment woman zombie thing. Wasn't able to take her out, unfortunately. Didn't end up making any difference anyway. So Maddox, I think, maybe was able to kill a couple or one more Bane Knights, so the Bane Knights have thinned out quite a lot on the left-hand flank. So that flank ended up not collapsing in the end, which is pretty lucky, I think, on my part. I think the Journeyman Warcaster killed another one, and the Stormlance looks like didn't manage to kill anything, despite having so many that nice attack and the Electra Leaps. And then finally, no, I think that's it. I think that's all I managed to do. So I did a lot of damage, put Finn in base contact with Goreshade, but that was it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do anything more than that. So if it was no assassination for me on this turn, and it would have been difficult anyway, then I think that's pretty much it. So all Christian has to do now is take out Maddox, and as you can see, he's got a Stormclad standing right next to her, and a Machine Wraith standing next to the Stormclad. And that was it in the end. I think that's the first thing he went for doing, to try and close out the game, and managed it. So the Stormclad managed to hit Maddox. With that Goreshade's attachment, she's at a very low defence, because that attachment has a nice aura that lowers your defence. So it's pretty easy to hit the Stormclad with the Machine Wraith, and then hit Maddox with the Stormclad, and absolutely squish her, cut her in half with his generator blade. So that was the end of the game. So there's the Stormclad standing over Maddox's corpse. That's the first time I've been assassinated by my own models, and it sucks, really. That shows another... I mean, I love playing this list. I quite enjoy playing Maddox, but those Machine Wraiths really forced her to move up a lot, because she's one of the only ones with magical weapons, her and the Journeyman Warcaster. She was really forced to move up a lot further than she wanted to, and that caused her to get assassanated. It was a really fun game, really high body count. I mean, we both had so many models on the table, and then got reduced down to virtually nothing by the end of the game. And so I think my list has got certainly got the power to take on that many Banes, and certainly has the threat ranges to manage it, but really relies on not having to deal with incorporeal Machine Wraiths. So I think if I play this game again, then next time I would try and protect the Stormclads with trenches. So try and stop that base contact, the 1-inch reach that the Machine Wraiths need to get to the Stormclads, and then that would then allow me to keep Maddox further back and not have to worry too much about her getting assassinated by my own guys. Apart from that, I could have spent more time occupying my own zone, but it was too tempting to use Finn to munch up through those Banes rather than score points. But again, maybe I could have got Maddox to my zone and slowly ticked over on the points, and maybe just held out long enough just to win a scenario. But I'm not sure, because I think he's got enough power in his list to take out a lot of models every turn. So unless we played exactly the same game again, we'd have to wait. We'd never know. But I think, given the same matchup again, I think the Cryx are slightly in an advantage. Probably depends on who gets first turn. If I got first turn, then I would have been able to have the battle lines much further towards his side of the table, and then I probably might have been able to keep him out of his own zone and dominated it, and then won on scenario a bit quicker. So if I had won the roll off, I wasn't sure whether I would have gone first or second, but thinking about it now, I think it's probably better to go first, despite having to squeeze trenches through a gap between some stuff. I do have Pathfinder for charges, so maybe it wouldn't have been too bad. Anyway, that's it. I'll try and keep it short for this time, and so it was a really fun game. I don't feel bad about getting assassinated, because I think Christian's game plan was really good, and although I feel like my game plan was also okay, I just needed to really think of a better way of dealing with those incorporeal models. Yeah, so that's it, and see you next time.